At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Here in Greenville County, we have 8 different places where a 911 call can be answered.
It is the largest county in South Carolina. It's a challenge.
The type of information that a telecommunicator gets from Radius Plus is location-based technology. You can see where the caller is, if they have a medical issue, if they speak a different language. They're immediately able to text to that caller in their native language. It reduces response times because it immediately gets first responders where they need to be.
Carbine, it's multimedia. You can get text, translate to whatever language, getting away with the legacy equipment and going into a cloud-based solution.
It's the first time in U.S. history that we have an EZNet through cloud-native call handling.
As a police officer, to have the victim go video, that's unheard of.
You're getting upgrades every month, not every year.
To schedule your free Carbine demo, please visit carbine.com/WTT.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, as well as Rapid Deploy and Carbine, and a big shout out to patrons, as always, for everything. We've got a lot of bonus content and everything coming up for those who are patrons. If you want to become a patron, you can check us out. That's going to be patreon.com/WTT podcast. You can help support us there as well. And something new that I'm actually adding for patrons of the podcast. So there is a VIP tier for patrons that comes with a t-shirt. Well, now that I have a bunch of hats that are coming up as well that I've been doing, I don't think you can see it. Oh, right there, right in back, like by my nose, that piece right there, that is a hat press that I have. And I've been putting all those patches on hats and everything, and they've been selling out like crazy. So what I'm going to be doing now for those at that VIP tier is I'm going to add a choice. So you can either get a t-shirt or you can choose to get a hat. And then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a VIP plus tier where you can get both. You won't have to make the choice for the VIP plus. You can get both. You can get the hat and the t-shirt along with all the other swag and discounts that come with it. So make sure to look out for that. So another perk for patrons that's going to be coming out. There's so much stuff that's going on. It is currently July 11th, 2022. June went by super fast, and this month is already going by fast as well. Got a lot of stuff going on. There's going to be some trips, tons of episodes. A new DRT Round 31 is going to be coming out, and by the time this episode comes out, that will have already been done. So that one is with OnStar as well as Rapid Deploy. We are talking about telematics and 911 along with some dispatcher stories. So hopefully you enjoyed that one. And as a perk for patrons only, audio versions of the DRT as well as Open Mic Live. And then we've got APCO, National APCO, that's coming up. I'm going to be out there. I'm not going to have a booth. I don't have any speaking sessions. However, I'm going to be there with sponsors and doing a bunch of different stuff, some camera work, and just a lot of content that I'm going to be doing. So I'm excited to be going to APCO out in California and Anaheim. And who knows, Disneyland is out there. So I don't know if I'm going to have time for it, but it would be cool. Either way, a lot of good stuff that's coming up, and then all the conferences that are coming up in the fall as well. So make sure to check out those that are coming up, and where I'm going to be as well, recording episodes, doing sessions, and just enjoying what I do. It's been really good. So make sure to look out for that. I am excited today. I've got my guest here, and we're going to be talking about not only her story, but so much more, and things that we need to be talking about, things that were, taboo for such a long time, but it's a new day, and it's the era of the headset, and we're talking, and we are sharing these stories, and we are, healing and finding some form of closure together through the power of storytelling. So I'm excited for this episode, and my guest today is Amanda. She's a 911 dispatcher out of Burt County Sheriff's Office, and that is out of Nebraska. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for sending the request. I have the request on the website, and I share it every so often, and people don't usually see it. But and I'll end up getting a message or something for scheduling an episode, and I saw yours come in, and I read the information that you had on there, and I thought we need to do this episode. We need to get you on here, share your story, and not just for you, but for everybody who's out there, those who are going to be listening to this, who will get a lot out of it. So I'm, again, excited to have you on and to help get your story out there. So just to begin with, how did you get involved in public safety in the start to begin with there?
So I never really planned to end up in dispatch. I didn't know much about it. I was going to college actually for criminal justice. I was interested in public safety, didn't really know where I wanted to go with that. And I was getting bored because I was going to school and I was working at Walmart, and I just absolutely hated it. And I was sitting in a coffee shop one day, just like scrolling through job postings,
Mm-hmm.
and posting for a local dispatch center at a county like just north of where I lived. And I saw the post and I was like, that seems kind of cool, but like I couldn't do that. I'll just throw in an application, see what happens, Had a call on my phone the next day, wanted to do an interview and everything, and kind of just ended up accepting the job before I realized what had happened. Had no idea what I was walking into, honestly, but just fell in love with it immediately.
So here's my question right off the bat. Now you mentioned that you're going to school, right? Criminal justice, but you're working at Walmart at the time. How long had you been working there before you end up going to dispatch?
3 years.
Oh, so the reason I ask is because it seems like, and it's not just Walmart. It's also any place that is similar to it. It seems like there a lot of people there, when they go in, they're upset with the employees, or they're waiting in line, and it seems like there's 20 different cash registers, but there's only 3 people working, so people are always getting upset. The reason I bring this up is because you're kind of basically training already for dispatch, working at that place.
Absolutely, very much so. We by the end of the time that I worked there, I was like the, for lack of a better word, like the enforcer. So when we had a rude customer, someone would call me over, and I'd be the one that had to calm them down and get them out of the store. So it really, looking back on it now, it was really good practice for dealing with people on 911 and on the phone. So it worked out.
Well, for sure. And the fact that people would bring you over so that you could help calm them down. I mean, obviously you had a certain demeanor to you, or just the way you were presenting yourself to, whether it be coworkers or other customers, and people are seeing this. So yeah, you already had the makings of this position, being a first responder there, answering these calls and stuff, and having to deal with people who are not having the best day. And so you had this training already coming into it. So that's that's pretty awesome. But also, so another question here. Did you possibly have any type of sit along or anything before you started getting into dispatch?
I did not have a dispatch sit along. Since I was going to school for criminal justice, I had done some ride-alongs with our local law enforcement. And on one of those, they had taken us into the dispatch center, kind of introduced around and said, "Hey, here's our ride-along for the day," or whatever. And I remember standing in dispatch and being like, "Wow, this is so cool! Like, this would be awesome." Didn't think anything else of it after I left, but no, I never got to sit in at all before I started. Probably would have been a valuable experience, but didn't come up.
So with the ride-alongs, did you have like anything interesting happen? And the reason I ask is because almost every time that I've spoken to somebody about ride-alongs, I share some of mine, and some of the ride-alongs that I had were crazy. Like, one, there was a fight, and this guy got sprayed in the face from security as the officer that I was with and I are getting out there, and this guy is just yelling and screaming, "Dios, por qué Dios?" in Spanish. In English, the translation is "God, why God, why?" Because he's getting sprayed in the face. And I have to add the fact that this guy who got sprayed in the face wasn't doing anything. He might have been part of the fight, but when he was walking out, he wasn't like the person ahead of him who was like struggling and being a jerk and stuff. This guy was just simply walking out, and another security guard comes out of nowhere and just starts spraying him in the face. And I thought, like, he didn't even do anything, man.
Oh, yikes. No, I did several ride-alongs. I think the most interesting one, we did get into a pursuit, which was super cool. And I know now, like our agency, if they get into a pursuit with a ride-along, you get kicked out on the side of the highway to fend for yourself.
Oh man.
Um, it's cool that I was allowed to stay in the car, I guess, and I didn't realize that at the time. But we did get into a pursuit. It was really fun, and that's always a cool experience. But and then it ended up the kid just had earbuds in and didn't hear the sirens, so everything ended up okay. But it was really fun, to be able to have that experience and get the little adrenaline rush that we don't necessarily get on this side of the radio.
Yeah, for sure, because you're in there, and I don't know if they told you, but they hadn't told me when we went lights and sirens to brace myself. So as we're going and we're bobbing and weaving through traffic, I'm just poof, poof, like hitting the side and coming back. And I remember the deputy I was with, he just starts busting up laughing, and he goes, "You should probably brace yourself." I was like, "Thanks, man. I'm concussed now, but thanks."
Very much so.
So that's awesome that you got that as well. Now, when you start going through this hiring process and everything, how long did that process take before you started actually getting in there and training?
So it was very, very quick. The department that I started with was a little bit bigger than the one I'm at now, but still a rural department. So I went in for an interview with the sheriff and the dispatch supervisor, and I think that interview was maybe 30 minutes, and then they called me back 1 or 2 days later and asked if I would take the position. So very short hiring process. We didn't do any sort of psych eval or we didn't even do a drug test, honestly. So very quick and easy hiring process, honestly, compared to what a lot of departments are.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome then, because mine, yeah, it was definitely long. One of them, when I first started dispatching, that one, I didn't hear anything for about 2 months, and I thought I screwed myself somehow in the process. And the chief ends up showing up out of nowhere, and he just ended up telling me that the reason it took long was because the background took long. And I was hired. I was hired that day, but 2 months later, but I started that same day that he came to ask me if I still wanted the job. I started that day and worked midnight shifts. So how long after you got hired did you actually start? That you went in?
I think it ended up being about 2.5 weeks, just because I ended up giving notice at the job I was at.
Mhm.
Um, so it was pretty quick. Just as soon as I was ready, they were ready for me to get in there and start. So
So let's think back a little bit, because you've been doing this for about 4 years now. So when you first walked into the center, what was that like for you? Do you remember everything that you saw? Like, were there multiple screens, multiple keyboards? Were you overwhelmed by it or anything? Because I know when I first walked in, not the well, I mean, it was overwhelming a little bit for the smaller police department where I very first started, but when I ended up moving back home to Southwest Michigan, I was working for a central dispatch, county dispatch, and it was the county that I grew up in. And I remember walking in and thought, "Oh, what did I get myself into? Like, this is way different now." So what was it like for you?
For sure. I remember it vividly because I don't remember really feeling like overwhelmed. I just remember feeling super excited when I walked in and saw kind of the setup. And the first place that I worked did have a very um, probably not as high tech as a large large area in our state, but they had a bunch of different screens, multiple keyboards, multiple computers, everything. And I remember walking into dispatch and just looking around, and it looks like a spaceship. And I was like, this is awesome. I can't believe I get to do this. And that was really the impression I had just from day one.
Oh, see, now that right there is just like you said earlier, it really got into your blood, really, you stuck to it. It was something that you wanted. And walking in there, it's always awesome to hear that when someone was talking about that first day and having that feeling of, man, this is what I get to do. This is very, very cool. And I might have been overwhelmed at the beginning, but when I started getting into it, yeah, I mean, of course, I caught the bug early on. I had 3.5 years at the first place, and when I came to the central dispatch in Southwest Michigan, it was the same thing. That first night, even though it was overwhelming, that first call that I heard, which was freaking nuts, um, it was like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. I know I'm supposed to be here. For all of us, the pay really isn't the greatest. Sometimes people would say, oh, you're just doing it for the money. You get paid like probably really, really well. And I would say, no, no, we don't. We're there for a reason. A lot, there's a reason that people say this was their calling, because it definitely is. We're there, we want to help people, and that's how it comes out.
Absolutely. If we were in this for the pay, we'd be in a different job.
Oh, for sure. Right. That's why there's a lot of people that you end up talking to. And I know that I've talked to a bunch of people at different conferences or just on the phone in general, folks saying, we're paying so much, but whatever restaurant or retail store or whatever down the road pays way, way more an hour. So of course they're going to go there, and they're going to want to do that. But I think it's changing a lot too in different states, where they are noticing and realizing that there is so much more that y'all do. And it's not just answering the phone, right? There's probably 15, 20 different positions all in one that we're doing, and it's changing, and people are seeing it, and people are actually trying to pay what it's worth. A lot of places you can't, but it is changing. I feel like it's changing.
Absolutely. I think we're starting to see that even just from the public perception too. It's been coming to the forefront some more. We just had a massive wildfire out here, and this was the first incident I've ever had where we had the community publicly putting on Facebook, shouting out the dispatchers that ran that incident. And I've never seen that before. It's always, and kudos to them, it's always to the firefighters or to the first responders on scene, but no one ever thinks to, mention the dispatchers running it. And this was the first incident I've ever worked where people were straight up calling out dispatch on Facebook and on social media and saying, shout out to them. And so it's really cool to see the public kind of start to realize what really goes on behind the scenes too. I think that's helping the overall just perception of the position.
Yeah, I fully agree, because just even conversations like this, and sharing your story, there's a large chunk of those who listen to this podcast that are from the general population, and they listen and they learn. When I very first started this out, a good friend of mine who lives in Hawaii, he sent me a message, and he goes, "Man, I really understand now." And I said, "Oh, okay. Like, what do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I was in just a minor crash, and I called 911, and they put me on hold, and I was pissed off. and just angry because why would they put me on hold if I'm calling 911? I have an emergency. And he goes, but after listening to just the first few episodes here, I understand that my emergency isn't the only emergency, and I'm not going to be like that next time. So these conversations matter. The information that centers put out, whether it be in social media or the news or whatever, it matters because people, they learn, and it's like you said, it's changing the perception of what dispatchers and call takers do and why they do it.
Absolutely.
So what was your training like then? Your training in the beginning and then going into call taking. What was that like for you?
So again, very small, rural area. That when I started with my first department, they did not have a training program.
Mm-hmm.
No book, there was nothing. It just kind of was, you're going to sit with this person until you figure it out and have at it kind of thing. And so just roughly from what I can recall from the structure, like my first week was like learning your phonetics and your 10 codes and all that fun stuff. And then in that first week, I was getting on the radio. And then the second week was starting to take calls. And then by the third week, I was basically doing it on my own, just with a trainer there. And then they just kind of eased it to the point where I could work on my own from there. So it was a pretty fast pace that they had you moving at. But in a small center, it worked okay. We did end up writing a training program for the department about 6 months later because it was very badly needed. Because it was a program that worked well if you worked with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we did have trainees coming in that just really were struggling and needed the structure of a step-by-step program. So thankfully they're all set up with a training program now. But yeah, it was a little rough at the beginning, but it was a good process.
So then that ends up being good, right? You end up going through the shit, for a lack of a better way to put it. and so that others don't have to go through that, you guys created this program, and now things are good to go. So I firmly believe that our own experience, whether it be in life, bringing it to dispatch, or in dispatch, what you end up dealing with, it ends up helping, because you get to evolve, or you get to help mold those new folks who are coming in. And so you're at a different center now, right? So those who are going to that one, they're going to get to reap the benefits of what you helped put out there. So that's awesome. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. It's definitely defined like the rest of my career too. I train at my current department as well, and same thing, came in here. We didn't really have a training program, and now we do. So I feel very strongly about training and standards in 911 just because of that experience and feeling like I was lost on so many calls and thinking about the real impact that could have had on someone, had I not been able to figure out what to do. And the lack of training is it's something that really should be standardized across the country. So I'll get on a soapbox about that.
There are a lot of folks that definitely feel the same way you do. I for one, in the same way with, how these training standards, it's different everywhere. In some places, it's just jump right in. So for example, when I started in 2001, I went in, I told you I went in that first night, right? Well, my trainer, very seasoned trainer, I'll leave it at that, a seasoned dispatcher and call taker. And he showed me everything. Okay. He showed me everything, what it was for, and kind of how to use it. And then there was an on call that came in, and I observed him. And then after that call, he turns and looks at me and says, "All right, it's your turn." And I thought, hell no, like, there's nothing else to this. And that was basically my training, because the way he put it was, you got to be human, you have to have common sense, and you have to have some thick skin to do this job. And you've got to jump in there and do it, or else you're really never going to learn. That's how you learn how to do this, is jumping in there. Now, I will say, in the defense of the department that I worked at, I did have a 40-hour beginner dispatchers course that I did. But it wasn't until like a week or two later that I ended up doing that. But I was in there learning and just going through the motions, to these different codes that I had to type, like literally type in to this old radio system so that I could get the tones to go off for fire rescue to go and do things. Now, we didn't do medicals. We would get the pertinent information and then transfer to what we called county radio, which is just basically the county central dispatch. But that's how it was. That's how it was in the beginning for me, for that training. And man, I've held on to that. and when I went to the other center, and because I was training there as well, or I was a trainer there. I wasn't certified, I wasn't a CTO, but there was a point where we ended up being so short staffed that everybody was training people so that we could have them coming in. So that definitely followed me going over there. Now, during your time there at the first center we're talking here now, you go through your training. And what about some of those early calls? Do you remember some of those early calls?
I know like the first week or so, I don't really remember a ton. I'm sure it was, the admin calls, there's a code kind of stuff. But I do vividly remember my first 911 call. It was my third week on, and it was the middle of the night, probably like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I answered the 911 line, and all that was on the other line was just this girl, and she was just whispering over and over again, "Help me, help me, help me." And again, it's my first 911 call, and I just felt like my stomach just drop. And I was like, "Oh shit, like I don't even know where to start." And at the time, the 911 location service we were using wasn't the best. So it had like a rough location, but it was about like maybe 3 city blocks in the main city that we were in. And so I started thinking like, oh my gosh, how the heck am I going to find this girl? I asked my trainer, and my trainer was very, kind of like you said, very seasoned, very no nonsense. And his thoughts were, if she can't give you any more information, you can't do anything. And as a brand new baby dispatcher, I was just horrified, thinking like, oh my gosh, this girl needs help. Like, we can't do anything. So he took over the call. He tried to talk to her. She couldn't say anything. We ended up, he ended up disconnecting the call. Well, she kept calling back. So we knew, something's really, really wrong here. Kept looking into it, couldn't get a better location. So at one point when we had disconnected one of her multiple calls, I called her phone back, and on her voicemail, she had her like a nickname. Obviously won't use her real name. But it'd be like, hey, this is Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started running all versions of that name through our system: Chris, Christine, Chrissy, all those kinds of things that it could possibly stand for. Couldn't find anything. And then went onto our assessor's website and started running property owners in that loop that we had gotten, that 3 city block radius. Pulled all of those names, ran all of them through our CAD system. Finally found a gentleman who had had several incidents at his residence with his girlfriend, Christina, whatever the name was. And thought, you know what, I bet that's it. That's the only thing that made sense. So we were able to send an officer to that address. Sure enough, it was the right address. She was actually overdosing on a large amount of medication. And I remember finally getting that all confirmed. She was on her way to the hospital, and I like sat back and went, oh my God, I think I can do this job. That was awesome. And that was really the moment that I was like, yep, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. There's just nothing else I want to do.
Oh man, so I'm literally on the edge of my seat as I'm listening to you tell that story, because those are the ones where, and I tell people all the time, because they would say, how did you do this job for so long, or how do you do certain things? And I would tell them, we end up going through every resource that we have available, sometimes resources that people wouldn't even think of to look at. And so, like you're mentioning, the properties and stuff in the area to be able to find different information, and then, kind of cross check that with your in-house computer or whatever to see if there's been any incidents there. And then, bam, you find this information, something that's similar, very similar. And then you get somebody out there, and I can feel it in my chest, that feeling, that satisfaction of, hell yeah, like we just did that. And man, that alone is what annoys the shit out of me, that people don't consider, dispatchers and call takers as first responders. Because, man, if you were just answering the phone, I mean, that none of that would have happened, right? If that's all that you do. But it's not. Look at what you did. Like, that's amazing.
Absolutely. It really does make a difference. And I try to tell people that the dispatcher that takes your call and the amount of care and interest that they put into helping you, it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference in the outcome of your call and how it gets handled. And people just don't understand that it really does start there.
Yeah, it's that is awesome. Well done. I applaud you. That is great work right there. And those people, the people out there, they also, end up realizing that there are folks there that can help me. It's not just those out on the road. There are the folks that are answering these calls that are basically detectives ourselves, right? We're going through and trying to find different information, trying to get people out there. And then when it happens like this, that's just like, yes, that's the way to do it. Man, that is so good. That is an excellent story. Thank you for sharing that. So you're going through, and you've had these calls and everything. Now you said that you've got two different centers that you were working at. Now, looking at the notes and everything, there were a few things that ended up happening. Now, was this, you know 2 years into that first center, and then coming back, and you've had 2 years at the new center, or how did all of this work out? What exactly happened that you ended up leaving for a little bit and then coming back?
Yeah. So I started at my first department in August of 2018. In March of 2019, the state of Nebraska had just horrific flooding across the state, just based on the amount of snow we had gotten that year. None of it had melted. A bunch of storms came through. It was just a whole bunch of factors came together. We ended up experiencing just incredible floods across the state, and the county that I was working at, the Platte River runs just all around the edge of it. So we were just evacuating communities back to back to back to back. And working nonstop during that time. And so we were dealing with these floods, and there was a deputy that we all have our favorite deputies. He was one of mine, and he also worked on the fire and rescue department. And so he was taking his airboat out on the Platte River to go do rescues and pull people out of their houses and all that kind of stuff. And he called into dispatch March 24th, 2019. I remember it very vividly. He called into dispatch to let me know that he was going out on an airboat rescue out of county. So he would be unavailable for a little bit. I'm like, okay, no worries. Didn't think anything else of it until he called back in maybe half an hour later. And I thought he was telling me he was back. And instead, he was telling me that he and the 6 other firefighters that had gone with him had capsized in the river. And he was calling me from the river and said that they needed help. And he asked if I could try to find a helicopter to pull him out. And I had no idea what to do. Started calling around, trying to figure out what to do. We ended up getting the National Guard to send a couple helicopters out there. Pulled those guys out of the river. They ended up being okay. They had to go to the hospital for some hypothermia, but they're all recovered and well today. But hearing that call from that person that I had worked so closely with and had a good relationship with, there was a point in time where he had called back, and he was the most patient person with dispatch, never bugged us for, hey, where's the tow truck? Or, can you get an ETA on, this? And he had called back 5 minutes after the initial call and said, hey, I know you're doing everything you can. but I just don't know what else we can do here. And when he said that, I heard it in his voice that he was like realizing if we couldn't get these helicopters, he didn't know if they were going to get out. And so walking away from that incident, the immediate days following, I really struggled. I couldn't keep food down. I was just in shock. And I had reached out to our chief deputy who got me connected with our EAP program. I went to see a counselor twice, which looking back now, I know that 2 visits to a counselor is nowhere near enough to deal with something like that. But I went to see a counselor twice, and by that point I was feeling better. I was functioning, and so I thought, oh, I'm good. What I didn't realize until about 3 months later was that I was developing PTSD, which I ended up getting diagnosed with down the road. But about 3 months after the incident, I started having flashbacks. I would go driving at night for hours and just zone out, like basically dissociate is what I've realized it is now looking back. There's nights that I just don't have any memory of, and I developed just horrible mental health issues. I was suicidal almost on a daily basis during that time. So I ended up having an incident where I was suicidal, and I called 911 for help. And this wasn't in my county. This was in a neighboring county. I had a firearm on me, and I was serious about using it to end my life that night. And so I decided to call 911 as a last resort. Maybe someone can talk me out of this. I don't know, kind of thing. The county that responded was just absolutely amazing, very helpful. The deputies that came out, just absolutely top notch, ended up taking me to the hospital, got some help. So after that incident, I reported myself to our administration and said, hey, this is what's going on. I think I might need some help. What do I do? Ended up talking to them about everything. And after a little bit of a process, they decided that they didn't feel comfortable with me working there anymore with my state the way that it was, which I was really frustrated with at the time, but also understandable. I needed to get my head straight for sure. But so I ended my employment there with the first county, and then went into about 3 months of just absolute unemployment. During that time, my mental health tanked even further because my support system really was the people at my department. And I relied on them, when I had a bad call, I would call them and they would listen. And I lost that whole support system. So I went through a time where I really became what I would, what we would refer to as a frequent flyer. I was suicidal on a regular basis. My local police department where I lived got to know me very well, unfortunately. But they were fantastic. I had good experiences. I had bad experiences. But the majority of them, they came out and they took the time to listen and to help me figure out what to do. And so in about February of 2020, I had a conversation the very last time I ever had to have law enforcement out for my mental health. And a local officer had responded, and he came out and he said, Amanda, here's the deal. He's like, that we're going to come and talk every time that you call us. And he's like, and that's fine. And we'll do that. But we can't fix your problem. He's like, if you're okay calling us every single day, we'll come every single day. But he's like, I don't think you want that. And he said, until you step out and take ownership of your own mental health and getting yourself help, we're going to keep seeing you every single day. And he's like, I don't think you want that. And I remember listening to that, and I was actually irritated at the time when he said it because I wasn't in a good place. But I went inside after they left, and I looked up therapists in my area, and I ended up getting signed up with an appointment to see the therapist that I still see today. So after that conversation, started seeing a counselor, really started making progress so quickly. just because I had zero coping skills to deal with what I was going through. And so even just him teaching me the most basic techniques really improved drastically. So in February of 2020, then I started working at Aircom, which is out of Omaha, Nebraska, and they dispatch the air medical for air methods across the country. So Aircom here in Omaha does all 50 states. Um, so I started working there, and I was dispatching air medical services in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, which was really weird, but also like a really cool experience, and got me back into the dispatch environment. But it was nice because it kind of eased me in because I wasn't taking those frontline emergent calls. So I was able to ease myself back into a stressful environment, get back into, focusing on my mental health at the same time. And then I continued working there and got back into 911 with the agency I'm with now, Burt County, in April of 2020. And so I was working 911 part time and this air medical dispatch full time for 2020, 2021. And then I just recently switched back to full time 911 at the beginning of this year. So that's the whole adventure. It's a lot, but that's kind of the whole process that it took to get to where we are now. So,
Damn, I am proud of you. Like that is amazing. And to see you sitting here and like smiling and talking through all of this, like shit. I I don't have a lot of words, only to say like this is a powerful story, man. Like not a lot of people talk about this. Not a lot of people share moments like you're saying now. And I thank you for being, just being open, being vulnerable to all of this, and just sharing. I mean, there's so much power into this, and those who are going to end up watching and listening to this will definitely get something out of it, because there are a lot of folks out there that are probably struggling and have no idea where to go from there. And you went through it, and you ended up getting that help. And how awesome for that officer also to go out there, and talk to you and lay it out, be real and say, we're going to continue to do this. This is why we're here, but we can't help you fix this. It's on you. And you ended up going in and you made that phone call. And a lot of times that is the hardest step, right? That very first step is the hardest, because we're always afraid that we're going to stumble. And if we stumble, are we going to stay fallen on the floor? Or are we going to get up and we're going to, I firmly believe that, and myself, before I ended up getting into public safety, I was at what I would say was my rock bottom. And I'm a firm believer that when you hit that bottom, there's only one way, and that's going back up, even if it's clawing your way all the way back up. But it's where you find out what you're really made of as well. And you were at a point where you needed to have that change, and you're going through all of this, but that voice, that person telling you, and then you realizing it yourself, and then going to get that help, that's amazing. Yeah, I applaud you. Like, again, very well done. This is an amazing story. How have things been now, ever since then? This is also good too, because you say that, the training part of it, being a trainer and wanting to train folks and such, like this is also something that, of course, if you felt comfortable as well, to be able to share with others, to say, look, if you're struggling, I've been there, I know what it's like, and you can get through this as well. And hear my story, and you're able to tell people. And that's encouragement. That's empowering to know that there is that bravery and courage in asking for help. And it's not weak. It's courageous to ask for that help. How has it been?
so it's definitely impacted a lot of just the way that I look at my job, for one, and then it's affected the development of my career moving forwards in a lot of ways. Like you said, with training. So the department that I'm at now, I wrote their training program, or rewrote it, I guess, because we did have a little bit of one. Um, and in that, I put a lot of discussion with the trainees about I need you to understand what you're getting into here, the true gravity of the responsibility that you're being entrusted with. And you need to understand the things that can happen in this job. And just think through now, how are you going to handle that? There's a section that I have them go through where they need to list out 3 people that they would call to process a bad call with. And I'm like, you can put me on that list. You can put, maybe you get to know one of our deputies or one of our officers well. You can put one of them on the list, put a family member, whoever. But I need you to write down 3 people right now that if you had the worst day of your life here, that you can call and walk through that with, and that they will be there for you no matter how bad it gets. And so changing things like that, adding them into our training program, just as a result of my experience. I do share my experience with our trainees. But then also coming back, I was on the receiving end of a lot of crisis intervention and mental health services during that time. And like I said, I had some really positive experiences, and I also had some really negative experiences with that. And so coming back, I've been really, really fortunate to have a department administration that encourages me to go out and find new opportunities and just be the best that I can be with those experiences. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to get my certification as a crisis hostage negotiator. And I remember being in one of the levels of that class, and we were talking about negotiation, suicidal subjects, and specifically talking about talking people down off of a high level, like a parking garage or a bridge or something like that. And I was sitting there thinking, how weird is it that a year ago, 2 years ago, I was sitting on the edge of a bridge over the interstate being talked off by law enforcement, and now I'm here learning how to help other people in that position. It's mind-blowing, but it's so cool to have that experience. And I think everything kind of came full circle with that. And then also I was just blown away. I went to a crisis negotiators conference this last year, and there was an officer there that was one of the people who had talked me off that bridge. And I was able to go over and introduce myself, and he remembered me. And we were able to catch up, and I told him how grateful I was that he was there that night, and now I'm able to learn how to do that same thing for other people. It's been really cool to see it come full circle and just have that impact. So
Wow. I'm trying to hold back my emotion here a little bit, because that is that's a moment that is hard to explain, right? To be able to see the officer who was there and make that connection again, right? And say, this is where I'm at now, and say thank you. And just to be able to share this and continue to move forward in a profession that you loved right off the bat in the beginning. And, you ended up going through everything that you went through, and now you're back and you're just kicking ass like that. That right there that's what this is all about. It's hard for me to put into words, because it's just so good. And thank you for the job that you do, but also for sharing this. And just any as we're going into the wrap up of this episode, because I know you've got a place that you have to get to here, and I think we've got like a part 2 episode or a dispatchers roundtable, something else, because there's so much more here as well. But going into the wrap up of this episode, and again, thank you very much for reaching out and wanting to be a guest on the show to share your story. And for anyone who's listening or watching, any advice that you could give in reference to, for those who feel like they're struggling, but I will say right off the bat here, before we get to this last part, all of this that I do now started because I was struggling in dispatch, because I didn't really have anyone to talk to, and I needed to get my calls out. So I started writing about it first, and then I got introduced to podcasting. So then I started sharing my stories through this platform. And I thought, this has always been therapeutic for me to share stories. If I can get others to come on and share theirs, it'll probably be therapeutic for them as well. So let's just continue to do this. So that's where all of this started for me. And it's been amazing ever since, the experience. So for those who, and because I would bury those calls, but then once I took that first step and got them out there, I felt so much better. And a lot of people have said the same thing, or just simply listening to the episodes, listening to these stories, they feel like they're not alone. So for those who are listening, have heard your story, what advice do you have to them who, might be struggling as well, who might not want to reach out or might be on the fence of reaching out because of how they feel they might look? What what information or advice do you have for any of those who might be in that situation?
Well, first of all, I'm just a huge advocate of just go ahead and reach out,
Mhm.
such a stigma, and people do feel uncomfortable reaching out because they think that they're going to be looked at as, well, maybe this isn't the job for you, maybe this is just too much, you should be able to handle it, kind of thing. And that's just the fact of the matter is this, like what we do every day and what we hear every day, it is too much for one person to just keep in all the time. It's not okay, it's not healthy. And so whether you can talk to a coworker about a call, I'm a huge proponent of therapy. You don't have to have something going wrong in your life to go talk to a therapist. Just being proactive with that, in this career, a therapist is someone with that has the same level of confidentiality that we do. So if you have a call that you really need to talk to somebody about and you're thinking, I need to talk to someone, but I'm not allowed to share the details of what happened. You know what? You can go to a therapist and you can talk about that because they have that same level of confidentiality. They can't repeat a word that we say. So that was something that I found really helpful from that. The other thing is just if if you're feeling like you can't speak up, just find a safe person. Find someone to talk to, because one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't say something sooner. Um, Before that night that I hit like that ultimate point of crisis, I had bad nights. I knew that I was having bad nights. I had nights that I had those thoughts and I just didn't want to act on them yet. Um, and I wholeheartedly wish that I had sat down with someone earlier than I did and said, "Hey, I'm having these thoughts. I really don't know what to do about it. Can you help me?" Um, Instead of letting it get that far. And granted, I looking back, I'm obviously that's dictated the course of my career from here on, and I don't necessarily regret what happened. But if I could change one thing, I would have spoken up sooner, and I don't think that I would have had any regrets about that in the long run at all.
Perfect. Thank you, man. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And yeah, we definitely need to do something else. We'll talk offline here. But again, thank you so much for the job that you do and just for sharing this story. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/within the trenches podcast. This episode has been sponsored by Indigital Rapid Deploy as well as Carbine. And if you're looking for any bonus content, you can check us out, and that is patreon.com/WTT podcast. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as Twitter. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and within the trenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.